This is the Best of Mike and Mike podcast on ESPNRadio.com. The Best of Mike and Mike.
Hey, it's Greeny. Thank you for checking out the Best of Mike and Mike podcast. This is what we have for you today. Plenty of reaction to the NBA trade deadline, including Brian Windhorst in our studio. Louis Riddick at the Combine breaking down the two big quarterbacks. And don't miss Adnan getting you ready for the Oscars.
The Best of Mike and Mike.
And as we officially freeze our collective tuchus off here in Connecticut, we have a delightfully warm menu and a delightful co-host in with me this morning. Danny Kanell is in for Golick. And Danny, I've got a little menu for you this morning.
Let's hear it.
Are you ready? Here's what we have on this smorgasbord. Coming up today, we'll explain why the best strategy in sports needs to be made illegal. We'll explain why I might be the first pick in the NFL draft. I have a statistic attached to Tiger that I might have known and yet still sort of stopped me in my tracks. And with the Oscars on Sunday, we will do the Adnans because we didn't have the budget to do anything better. All that and a whole lot more. We'll start, of course, with the NBA trade deadline, but it is delightful to have you here. How are you?
Great to be here. I've been a little bored sitting around, freezing up here in Connecticut.
It's
so
insane.
I'm thrilled to be here.
You haven't been bored. I've been hearing you on all sorts of other shows. You've been cheating on us left and right. You're like running around doing any show that asks when, of course, you know that we've just been sitting by the phone and waiting. And one of the things we're going to do, obviously, it is the Oscars this weekend. And so we are going to take your suggestions all morning long for best sports movie. In fact, we'll get the hashtag going right now, best sports movie. And to me, right off the bat, before we get to the NBA trade deadline, I think it is an impossible discussion to have without separating it into two categories.
Agreed.
Because there are sports dramas and there are sports comedies, much as there are dramas and comedies that have nothing to do with sports.
Sure.
And you cannot compare them. So if for the sake of discussion you wanted to say that Caddyshack and Raging Bull are two of your favorite sports movies, they cannot be compared to each other.
Exactly. You can't take one over the other because it might be whatever you're in the mood for. So I completely agree with you. You have to switch them up.
But we'll hear from you all morning long, and then we will just enjoy listening to great moments from great sports movies. Hashtag best sports movie is what we'll get going, and we'll get it going right away. But we'll start with the trade deadline yesterday, which was nuts. I will tell you what, I'm awfully glad that I spent much of the day yesterday thinking, you know what, not much is going to happen. We know Dragic is going to go. Well, I'll find out where he wound up going at some point, and I won't bother watching the trade deadline special that ESPN did. And boy, am I glad that I wound up turning it on. And my compliments to Cassidy and Tom Penn was up there, and Chris Broussard and Mark Stein and all of them. They did a terrific job because that stuff was coming fast and furious for about 45 minutes. And when it was all said and done, it was about as active and interesting a trade deadline day as we've seen in a long time.
It was. I was on board with you because, you know, I've been paying attention all week, had done some stuff earlier in the week on radio, and we had some NBA people on. And basically the gist of it was, well, it's probably going to be a slow day. You know, there isn't much out there to offer. You know, a couple deals might go down. And I went down to the basement. I was doing the same thing you were. I was watching the trade deadline show, the special, and all of a sudden, just the flurry of activity. I'm a Miami Heat guy. And I know Le Batard's show and those guys down there, they went nuts because of what happened with Goran Dragic coming to Miami. So I'm thrilled. It puts them back in the mix. Really felt like they were sort of irrelevant since LeBron left and Dwayne Wade's been hurt. Now, all of a sudden, they're an instant player again, the team that most people are calling now, the Miami Heat, a team that nobody wants to play if they make the playoffs.
Right. They are 8 games under 500, and yet in that Eastern Conference, suddenly they look like a sleeper, which will tell you what it was. And I agree with you, and I love those guys down there at Le Batard, but I thought it was a tad much when Stu Gatz was tweeting pictures of the trophy yesterday. They get Dragic, and all of a sudden, Stu Gatz, my buddy John Weiner, is it Weiner or Weiner?
I'm not sure. I just call him Stu Gatz.
It's Stu Gatz. Whatever it is tweeting pictures of the Larry O'Brien trophy because they got Goran Dragic. This is not exactly LeBron 2.0, but obviously it was cause for celebration yesterday. And if you sit and you look at the starting five that Miami now has, now what exactly is going on with Chris Bosh? Oh, because this is no joke. I mean, Bosh was admitted to a hospital, something to do with his lungs. I know he's been sick. I mean, obviously, we sincerely hope there's nothing seriously wrong with Bosh. I don't even want to put that into the same part of the conversation, assuming this is just something like, you know, he's got a bad cold.
Chronic, yeah.
Yeah, something like that. Assuming it's just something like that. Now, all of a sudden, you're looking at a pretty good team. We got a team that's got Dragic, Dwayne Wade, Luol Deng, Chris Bosh, and Hassan Whiteside as your starting five. They have remade themselves into a team that I agree, they're the team no one is going to want to play in the first round of the Eastern Conference playoffs.
Still, for me, though, it all comes down to Dwayne Wade and the health of that knee. And to me, I don't think he's going to be the same player he was back when he was MVP of the series, back when he was winning with LeBron. I still think he's going to have issues. Anytime he starts to, go on a sustainable stretch of games where you go and string him 3 or 4 games in a row, he has to take that night off. And I think without LeBron, he's going to have to help carry this team. And I love the move. I love the fact that it's there. Yeah, I think they can maybe win a series and upset somebody in the playoffs, but I don't think there's any chance they go much deeper than that.
Sean C. Phillips.
Well, obviously they upgraded at the position, and if you look at their starting five, they're not 2 or 3 teams in the Eastern Conference with a better starting five. Now, obviously they have to be healthy. D-Wade, they said he's playing tomorrow. They're going to need him to be D-Wade that we all know and love. Chris Bosh has to be the same. The kid that's coming on strong, Whiteside, I mean, he's playing great. I think Goran Dragic is an all-star caliber point guard year in and year out. So I tell you what, they better beware.
Here's what they are. They're infinitely better and infinitely more interesting than they were at this time yesterday. And I suppose that in and of itself is a step in the right direction. And in that Eastern Conference, where aside from Atlanta, I mean, is there, and people have their questions about the Hawks. Let's put it this way. You may have your questions about Wade. And they're completely legitimate questions. Can Dwayne Wade carry a team for more than a 4 to 6 minute stretch anymore? He used to be able to carry a team for 4 games in a playoff series. Can he carry a team? Forget about 4 quarters. Can he carry a team for 4 to 6 minutes? Maybe that's all he can do. But late in a close game, I'll put the ball in his hands. Now you show me who it is. Name the players in the Eastern Conference that you would rather give the ball to in a late-game situation and say, go get me a bucket right now than Dwayne Wade.
Not many.
Just look through the contenders.
Yeah.
Who on Atlanta? Who on Toronto? You giving the ball to Kyle Lowry before you're giving the ball to Dwayne Wade, even at this stage of Wade's career? Derrick Rose?
Yeah, Derrick Rose. It's almost the same issue. A healthy Derrick Rose or not? If he's mentally, where is he? Mentally, I would maybe say him. Maybe might be the only other option.
John Wall, Bradley Beal, Paul Pierce. Obviously, Cleveland, LeBron, Kyrie, that's where you're looking. And now you got to get down to the Milwaukees of the world. So could the Heat be a team that is worth paying significant attention to? I think yes. I think the answer is the Heat become a team. Also, for whatever this is worth, they have statistically the easiest schedule the remainder of the season. 17 of their next 30 games are at home. I think only 5 of their road games are against playoff caliber teams. I was looking at the stats earlier this morning. So, I mean, look for them to make a little run, maybe get themselves up into a position where they could be 7, they could be 6. Could they get themselves to 5? Probably not. That's a long stretch. They're 10 games behind that, so they're probably not getting to there. But they could get to 6, and now all of a sudden you're looking at a matchup with Chicago or Toronto or Washington. And could Miami be a team that knocks off one of those teams that we've been watching all year? I guess they could.
It'd be a lot of fun to watch. I tell you
well,
what,
for you, it would be a lot of fun to watch. I don't know. I mean, the whole world feels it'd be a lot of fun to watch. But I think it would be a lot of fun to watch. Mike and Mike presented by Progressive Insurance. Now you can test drive Snapshot, see how much you could save before switching to Progressive. Visit Progressive.com/Snapshot. The guy who is going to be getting all of the props on this, of course, is Pat Riley. And Amin El Hassan, is one of our NBA front office insider type guys. And he was talking yesterday in a bunch of places about Riley. And he made a very interesting point.
Isn't it amazing they didn't have to give up anybody of note on their roster? I mean, this is absolutely incredible. I think that the fact that they walked away with this, Whiteside is still the Miami Heat. Obviously, Bosh and Wade are still Miami Heat. And Luol Deng, everyone thought Luol Deng was a wrap. He had to be involved in this deal, and he isn't. This is real. I can't emphasize this enough. Pat Riley is he's one of the greatest coaches of all time. He might be a better GM than he is a coach. That's scary.
Here's the thing about Riley. I mean, Riley is now going to start, if he really does remake this, I don't think they're a championship team. There's not one of those good teams in the West right now that I think they could beat. So even if they made a miracle run to the final, which I don't think anyone expects, they're not winning a title right now. But could they be one more magical move away from that? They probably could. And here's the thing about Riley. If you're going to look at Riley and you're going to look at Phil Jackson, who are arch rivals, and I will always think of them in that way because I covered those legendary series when Phil was with the Bulls and Riley was with the Knicks, and Phil's teams always got the best of those generally because they had Michael Jordan. And Phil always had, but those two guys at the same age, they were players at the same time, they were coaches at the same time. There was a real rivalry between those two guys. If you're just looking at them as executives, and obviously this is Phil's first year as an executive, so it's too soon to say, Pat Riley just got Goran Dragic and gave up about the same amount that Phil Jackson got for Tyson Chandler. For Tyson Chandler, who's a very significant player. So, I mean, that's right there. That is one major move. He just went, pawn to queen 4 on Phil.
It's remarkable, and some people are just winners at life, and that's really when you look at Pat Riley. That's the best way you could describe him. And a lot of times it's so challenging, whether it's a player moving to the front office, a coach to the front office, whether they can make that smooth transition. Not only is he great at putting these pieces of the puzzle together, but he's also, as he showed with bringing the big three together, a great recruiter and a great, seller of the Miami Heat and getting guys to buy in to what he's selling and getting them to move. Of course, it's not that hard to sell South Florida.
No, I mean, they have some
but he does.
But no one
there's a
ever
lot of
did
egos
it
involved and playing for a little bit less here and there, taking less money to go play for championships. He's been phenomenal.
I remember a time when Doc Rivers was the coach of Orlando, and there were a bunch of big free agents, and we all thought everyone was going to go there because they've got all the built-in advantages, right? Yeah. No state tax, warm weather, everything else. And at the end of the day, they didn't. They didn't all go down there. That was the year that a bunch of huge players were free agents, and the one guy who went was Grant Hill, right? And obviously Hill was never the same again. Hill got hurt at the end of his time in Detroit, and it wound up not working out the way they would have thought. That was a separate situation. But my point is there are a lot of places you would think they should have built-in advantages, and they haven't. And they weren't like awash in rings before Pat Riley got there. So give the guy his due. Obviously, he's gotten it all done down there with the Heat.
And the one thing that probably impresses me, more than the moves and anything, and it's really what you look at when you talk about great coaches, is managing egos. And he's done that better than anybody. I mean, when you look at what it's
Phil's done that. No, Phil's done that better than anybody. That's the one thing Phil has done better than anybody is manage guys' egos. Right?
Yeah, but Pat Riley's done a pretty phenomenal job of it, too.
He has. But, I mean, Phil won 11 championships with guys who otherwise didn't win without him. I mean, the combined total of championships that the great players that Phil led to titles won without him is 1.
Right.
Shaq won 1 without him with Wade and Riley in Miami. But, I mean, Michael and Scotty and all that stuff in L.A. with Kobe and Shaq and everything else. I mean, Phil, if there's one thing Phil gets the credit for, I think it's that, right?
Yeah,
it's getting egos to work together.
Yeah, he's done that for sure. And I guess if you would compare the differences, it would be that, and Riley would be the motivator. I mean, some of the stories about what he did with, getting the Miami Heat before their championship with LeBron, and just the little kind of, and it's kind of cool, the little stories of what he would. There was one where he had all these different little motivational comments written up, and he put them all in a basket. There was some story about it. I'll have to look it up and get the details.
Well,
of it,
but I don't know if you can. I'm not accusing you of confusing it, but the story about Phil was that he had the entire team come together during a stretch when they were playing badly, and they each wrote down something on a piece of paper about the team that they were feeling, and they put them all into like some sort of bucket and set fire to it and let it just sort of burn away and fade away into the ether, and then they won the championships.
Mine's different. I'm going to find mine for you. I'll find it. I'm going to get it.
All right, I'll see your Pat Riley, and I'll raise you 1 Phil. You can never take anything away from Phil as a coach. But that isn't the question right now, because Phil isn't a coach right now. Phil is running a team, and he gave away Tyson Chandler to the extent that yesterday at the trade deadline, Goran Dragic wanted to be a Knick. He identified that as one of the places he wanted to go, and they couldn't find a way to get him because they had absolutely nothing to give up for him. And there were other players out there to be had. The one thing that happens at trade deadline is the disgruntled guys, the Reggie Jacksons of the world. I mean, you got Kevin Durant yesterday saying everybody wanted to be here except for one guy, and that guy is out of there. He woke up yesterday a Detroit Piston. In total, 11 deals were made yesterday involving 39 players, not including draft picks. Among the biggest names, as we mentioned, Dragic going from Phoenix to Miami. Kevin Garnett. All right, let's focus on that for a minute. Kevin Garnett going from the Nets to Minnesota. Now, Thaddeus Young goes to Brooklyn. Thaddeus Young's a pretty good player. Now, they owed him a bunch of money, and they probably weren't going to keep him anyway. And then Kevin Garnett goes there. What is the value of having a guy like Garnett, who some will define as the ultimate pro? And he gets under a lot of people's skin, but we all understand the professionalism and the intensity and everything else. When you've got a team where the median age is like 19 and a half, how valuable is just having a guy like Garnett in that locker room?
It'll be huge. I think what he brings to the table is exactly that leadership. My concern is how much longer are you going to get it? I mean, they say they want to sign him to a 2-year.
I heard Tom Penn say he thinks he's going to play next year as well.
Yeah,
that's what I heard him say.
And they want to sign him for a longer term, a couple more years. But again, is it worth that much to get somebody at the twilight of their career or even the downside of their career just for what he brings to the locker room. I've always wondered, isn't that what a coach's job is supposed to be? And, yeah, it helps to have it come from the players, of course, where you want somebody with that strong, imposing personality. But, I'm with you. How long are you going to get him for?
It seemed like a lot to give up for a guy who is clearly, it goes without saying that his best basketball is behind him, but how much does he have at all? And, again, you gave up a pretty good young player, comparatively much younger player in him, albeit one who is owed a whole bunch of money next year. Stephen A.
You got Kevin Garnett waiving his no-trade clause in Brooklyn, deciding to go back to Minnesota, the team he started his career with and held up that franchise on his shoulders for many years. He's going back to Minnesota. He's clearly about to retire. You get an opportunity to honor a guy who honored you with his years of service for a decade, where he carried the franchise on his back virtually single-handedly.
See, that to me would not be enough. Like Ryan Clark, and by the way, welcome to our new colleague, Ryan Clark, who officially announced that he's retiring as an NFL player. He'll retire as a Steeler, and then he will come work here at ESPN, and it's a magnificent addition to our football coverage because he's just a terrific analyst. But that's what you do. You go sign there. Kevin Garnett could have signed a one-day contract
right,
and retired as a Timberwolf.
Yeah, hired to put up the jersey and said, thanks for all the years.
You don't have to trade a pretty good player to get him in there to do that. I believe that they think he will provide more than that he will teach some of these young guys, particularly Andrew Wiggins, what it is to be a pro.
Yeah.
And I don't know how to quantify the value of that, but obviously Flip Saunders thinks it's very valuable.
Yeah, and it's a matter of, the relationships. How does he fit in with Wiggins? Because, he's gonna be a guy who's got a really strong personality. He plays hard. He talks a lot of smack. He brings that to the table. And teaching all of these young guys how to be pros, that there is some value in that. But when you give up a guy like Thaddeus Young, I don't know if it's worth it in the end. There was a lot of talk about going home. The place that drafted him out of high school in 1995, it was a long time ago. But again, is it worth the value of what you had to give up?
It's what's trending now. The NBA trade deadline brought to you by 5 Hour Energy. New improved taste, 10 great flavors. Have you tried 5 Hour Energy shots lately? Mike and Mike with Danny Kanell in for Golick. Another team that everyone was talking about yesterday that retooled their squad a little, though not as much as I thought at one point they might, was Oklahoma City. So you're looking at two teams that are going to be in the bottom half of their conference playoff picture, we would assume, Miami in the East and OKC in the West, and they become teams that nobody wants to play. On the Thunder, here's Brian Windhorst.
I think it's not just the two trades that they made on Thursday, but if you include the Dion Waiters trade that they made a month ago, they've completely revamped their entire second unit. They were not as deep over the last couple of years, and when they sustained injuries in the playoffs, they really couldn't sustain. And all these pieces they feel like they can keep long term. They weren't sure that they were going to be able to keep Reggie Jackson if he had gotten to free agency this summer. They feel good about keeping this newer core together.
So those become two very interesting teams, Miami and Oklahoma City. Now, at one point yesterday, Cerruti, I thought that Oklahoma City was going to get Brook Lopez. Right, and that's what Tom Penn was doing a great job putting up this whole look at what they've got the touch screen so he actually could turn Kendrick Perkins into Brook Lopez, like with just one touch of a button, and change the numbers and change the look of the team. And then all of a sudden, I am a Brook Lopez fan. Now, I know Brook Lopez, he has not been able to stay healthy, and that's a major consideration. But Brook Lopez is a guy, he's one of the very few pure fives in the league that can score. And that would be, I think, a valuable thing to have had. So if they had found a way to get themselves Brook Lopez yesterday, and he had been healthy, and those are two big ifs, and one of them already didn't happen, then I think he would have been talking about potentially a championship team. And I think Oklahoma City, forget about what spot they would have come out of, whether they come out of the 8 or the 7 or whatever it is. I think that all of a sudden would have looked like a title team. So they didn't get Brook Lopez. So that, and at one point during the day, at least watching the show, I got the impression that they were on the verge of getting him. If they had gotten him, then I all of a sudden would have said, watch out, OKC, I think, could become right there with any of the teams in the West to win the title.
Yeah, because one of the big reasons they're sitting down there at the 8th spot is because they haven't been healthy. So they're another one where health becomes a concern. Their issues aren't as big, I don't think, as a Dwayne Wade with the Miami Heat, because these guys have issues that are, they're still younger. They still have a lot of time for them to play together. It was interesting that I was fascinated with the Reggie Jackson, the comments. He was disgruntled. He wanted to get out of there. Kevin Durant finally comes out and says, well, hey, we don't want a guy there if he doesn't want to be there. He gets his wish, gets out of Oklahoma City. and goes to Detroit, and another team out of the East who's looking to kind of make a late push for the playoffs. So I always get fascinated on trade deadline, not because of the moves about the teams, but kind of the personal side. Like, and I was never traded. I was cut plenty of times, but just the fact of you're in the middle of the season and all of a sudden you're scrambling to get your stuff together. If you have family, you've got to get them together. You've got to pack up your place. That to me has always fascinated me, the personal side of the trade story.
It's the side of it that most fans don't pay attention to. And look, it's one of the downsides of being a professional athlete. You want to be a professional athlete. For the most part, I think Kevin Garnett, I heard Stein say yesterday.
It was only one of 5 that had a no-trade clause.
Was it 5 or 6, I thought he said. I thought he said he was one of 6 players that had a full no-trade. Either way, it's an extremely limited number. And baseball, like half the sport, has a no-trade clause. In basketball, these guys get shipped around regularly.
The best of Mike and Mike.
Mike and Mike.
The best of Mike and Mike.
All right, we are Mike and Mike, and our NBA insider extraordinaire, Brian Windhorst, has made his way into our studio. And in 2 minutes, when the rest of the country joins us, we will ask him his thoughts on all of the trade deadline moves that were made. But right now, we're taking his thoughts on the best sports movies ever made. Brian, good morning.
I'm a dialogue guy. I love great dialogue. I mean, The Natural is great, obviously, okay. Field of Dreams, wonderful, but I love Major League.
Major League.
And I think the all-time great, for me, number 1, Bull Durham.
We just had Costner in our studio. Again, his movie opens today. And A, he couldn't have been a nicer guy. And B, we were just telling stories about that movie in particular, because I agree with you. Golick was arguing on behalf of Field of Dreams as his favorite Kevin Costner baseball movie. I like Field of Dreams. I don't love Field of Dreams. Field of Dreams to me is not what it is for a lot of other people.
Well, it's not really a sports movie.
It's a drama.
It's a father-son story, which I don't know. I'm not a movie critic. I feel like if Field of Dreams is on and Bull Durham is on, especially if it's an unedited version, I'm taking Bull Durham every time.
It's a no-brainer. How about you with all baseball movies?
I know, and I'm not a baseball fan. That's because I was a baseball fan when I was a kid, but those of us in Cleveland know that the only way the Indians win anything, anybody from Cleveland wins anything, is in the movies.
In the movie, particularly in the movie Major League. All right, we'll pause and let the rest of the country join us, and then we'll get into all the NBA trade deadline action when Brian Windhorst continues with us here in our studio, and we'll get back to films when we do the Adnans off the top of the hour. So there was so much action yesterday, and it was fun to watch at the deadline. I will ask you this question to put it all in perspective. Did anything or will anything that happened yesterday wind up having an impact on who winds up winning the championship?
I think that the Thunder got better yesterday, and then the Suns got worse because they sacrificed, I think, some of their present for their future. And so those two transactions, I think, skids the path for the Thunder to make the playoffs. And if the Thunder get in, they're dangerous. So the answer to your question is yes. However, the Thunder have now added 5 players in this season, which is unusual. And you don't see teams that add that many pieces in the middle of a season make it all the way to the end. And basically, out of all the contending teams, they were the only team that really did anything. You know, you didn't see Cleveland, Chicago, Atlanta, Golden State, San Antonio really do anything. So I don't think necessarily it shifted the balance of power, but I think if you come out of yesterday and you're Oklahoma City, you have to feel good about the way the day played out.
How much did Miami help themselves?
Well, Miami made themselves a serious they had made the big.
Are they now a threat to knock off one of the big boys in the East?
They are definitely a threat. Their starting 5 is arguably in the top 3 or 4 in the league now, if they're all healthy. And unfortunately, we've got Chris Bosh, who's having a potentially serious issues in the hospital right now.
Well, that was my we brought that up earlier, and obviously that's something that's away from. We hear he's got something with his lungs and he's in a hospital. What do we know about that?
Yeah, he was not feeling well at All-Star Weekend. He was having some issues in his chest area, and I know it's every time you say chest, it makes people nervous, but I think it's more lung related. And he went to Haiti on vacation after All-Star Weekend, and they wanted to make sure he didn't get sick in Haiti. He was feeling ill before he left. And he just came back, and they sent him to it was one of these things, send him to the doctor. Doctor sends him for tests. Test says go into the hospital. So we're waiting to find out. Hopefully Chris is going to be okay. But that delays the Heat coming together, and it certainly put a damper on their big day yesterday. But from a personnel standpoint, they get the best player that moved, in my opinion, is Goran Dragic, an undervalued player. They get him for nothing, essentially. Now, the Phoenix will say, well, you got 2 first-round draft picks. Pat Riley will say, yeah, I gave you a 2021 draft pick. I'm 70 years old. Dwayne Wade's 33. We don't care about 2021. We need to get better now, and they did. And if I'm Cleveland, Chicago, Washington, Toronto, I'm like, man, I don't want to see the Heat in the first round of the playoffs, and they have the second easiest schedule in the East coming in. So even though they're in 7th place right now, I predict they shoot up and get, I don't think they're going to be a home court team, but they're going to be dangerous in that first round.
How much does that revolve around Dwayne Wade being healthy, though?
Obviously. Well, that's just, you're absolutely right. And it's like the preface of anything. And he's supposed to come back and play tonight in New York. Now, they're not going to have Chris Bosh. They're not going to have Dragic tonight, so tonight won't be a good example. But if Dwayne Wade is healthy, and when Dwayne Wade's been healthy this year, they've been a pretty good team. They haven't been a great team, but they've been a pretty good team. The other thing is they found the find of the year. They got this guy off the scrap heap, Hassan Whiteside, who's just been incredible. And if you go back and look at where they were on July 9th when LeBron said, see ya, when they thought they were going to lose Bosh to Houston for about 15 minutes, and look where they are now, it's an incredible recovery. It's, they've made themselves relevant again. Are they a championship contender? I'm not ready to go there, but they've made an incredible recovery.
All right, Mike and Brian Windhorst is in our studio. So when we look over in the Western Conference, you mentioned a lot of the bigger teams didn't make any moves yesterday, obviously keeping an eye on each other and themselves. And the Lakers and the Knicks, who were the 2 teams whose names came up, maybe because their names just always come up, didn't wind up getting Dragic, even though there was some thought that he would. Will Dragic re-sign in Miami?
I think so.
He's going to stay there, right?
Yeah. Yesterday was a bad day for the Lakers and Knicks because this is a guy who was going to become a free agent this summer, was not staying in Phoenix, and was going to be an option for them. And I really think an undervalued player. His touches were way down this year, and so I think that was a gettable guy because I don't think Marc Gasol is leaving. I don't think LaMarcus Aldridge is leaving. Kevin Love, he says he's not leaving. I don't think their top targets are there. So they were already going to go to secondary targets, and now one of the secondary targets I think is off. I think he's going to stay in Miami and re-sign. And, the Lakers tried to get him, actually. They talked with the Suns, and, they had the Suns had this Lakers draft pick that was top 5 protected this year. And the Suns actually said, hey, we'll give you Dragic, but you got to take the protection off of that pick. And the Lakers said, we can't do that. And that was one of the reasons why those didn't advance.
Minnesota, Kevin Garnett goes back to where it all started, who drafted him. It's a great story, a homecoming story, but they had to give up Thaddeus Young to get him back. Does this make sense from a value perspective?
No, it doesn't. I mean, maybe if you're a team marketing guy and you can sell, more tickets for KG, you can maybe argue that. But they traded a first-round draft pick to get Thaddeus Young, and they turned Thaddeus Young into 30 games of Kevin Garnett. And in what I thought was even more stunning than trading for him, they're saying they're going to give him a contract extension now. I mean, he is absolutely on his last legs. So you're basically going to pay him a lot of money to be an assistant coach, and maybe that's going to work out for your young guys. But it was a curious decision. But I think it's great for Minnesota. This is a market that has had nothing really to cheer about for since he left, really. And now they have the Rookie of the Year in Andrew Wiggins. He's coming back. They have a good-looking future. So there is some positive things going on in Minnesota. I just don't know from a basketball standpoint how this is going to immediately help them.
2 other things I want to ask you about. Mike and Mike, Brian Windhorst in our studio. His Subway Fresh Take. We are presented by Progressive Insurance. The Sixers trade away last year's Rookie of the Year and Michael Carter-Williams. There's a lot of split opinion on just how good a player he is, putting up big numbers on an historically horrific team. But they just keep trading people away and getting draft picks. And do people around the league think that what they're doing makes sense, or
No,
they don't?
They have eight picks in this draft. That's pretty darn good for an NFL team,
right?
In a 6-round draft, right? Or the 7-round draft, whatever it is.
Yeah.
The thing about it is that if you're going to rebuild, and even if you have your 3-year plan, along the way you want to pick up pieces and say, okay, this is our point guard, this is our power forward, this is our center. They seem to be doing that. They only had one guy that people in the league wanted, and that was Michael Carter-Williams. He's gone now. And, yeah, they've got Embiid, and they've got a guy in Europe, and Noel is interesting. But they've got all these picks, but it's like, well, how are you progressing towards actually building a team? When are you going to start building a team? And, they've made good trades. They've made smart trades. They've positioned themselves beautifully. And listen, if they win the lottery this year and get Jahlil Okafor, and let's say they had the Lakers pick now. They picked that up from Phoenix yesterday. Let's say they end up with the 6th. They could end up with like the 1st and 6th pick in this draft. And they could bring the guy over from Europe, and Embiid could come back, and all of a sudden they could have something beautiful. But they're relying on a whole lot of ifs and buts and a whole lot of promises that you really can't see through the haze. And that is what people in the league are saying, what are you doing? You're pushing this rebuild back even farther.
Brian Windhorst, who's a part every Sunday night, NBA Lockdown, the Insiders with Mark Stein and the rest of the Insiders, Sunday night, 7 to 10 Eastern Time here on ESPN Radio. And one other thing I want to get into with you, we may have to take this over to the top. I tried to watch Clippers-Spurs last night, which should have been a fantastic basketball game. And this sending DeAndre Jordan to the foul line throughout the entire fourth quarter, I know Shaq was talking about it on TNT last night. I'm putting together a fact-finding committee to look into some way that we can get this out of the sport, because I understand it's legal and I understand why you would do it, and yet it is unwatchable, and we need to do something about it.
Pop started doing it in the second quarter last night. It ruins the game, really. And I don't know what the answer is. They need to take legislation, but on the other hand, the whole reason is it's the Will Chamberlain rule, because you couldn't foul him just in the final 2 minutes. I guess you could push that out to the final 5 minutes of the game. But why couldn't you do it in the first 5 minutes of the second half? And so it would be a major adjustment to the game. But I do agree that it's something that the league's competition committee has to take a look at.
It's just purely as a fan, I don't like taking strategy away. And Danny's answer is make the foul shots, and I get it. But from an entertainment standpoint, it's just not entertaining to watch.
Mike and Mike.
Welcome to Mike and Mike at the Oscars. It's Hollywood's biggest night. Celebrities and entertainers gather from around the world, hoping to hear their name following.
And the Oscar goes to...
No fancy red carpet, no tuxedos, ushers, or seat fillers needed. This is Mike and Mike at the Oscars with special guest, ESPN's sagacious luminary of today's cinematics, Adnan Virk.
Adnan is here. The Oscars, of course, is Sunday night, 8:30 Eastern on ABC. And I want to do two categories with you, Adnan, or I should say, in the categories that we do, first tell us which movie or which performer you think will win.
Yep.
And then who you would vote for.
Gotcha.
So we'll do both of those. So we'll go with the big categories. I'm going to take them in reverse. We'll do the director, we'll do all the actors, and we'll do picture. All right? That seems like what everyone's interested in.
You got it.
Let's start with Best Director. Who do you think will win Best Director?
Winner's going to be Alejandro González Iñárritu for Birdman. It's a work of stunning technical virtuosity. He's using a lot of just... refusing to even edit. I mean, it's just these continuous long steady cams, and you're watching the movie going, oh my God, there's no edits at all. He's trying to put you in that claustrophobic world of Michael Keaton's character, and the fact that it's just so frenetic and so insular, and he's putting you in that Broadway experience. You cannot escape his brain because you can't escape the camera. There's no breaks, there's no edits, there's no cuts. So it really is just a stunning work of really technical grace. I love Richard Linklater, what he did with Boyhood, and the fact that was shot over 12 years, the experience and the patience and the chutzpah to really pull that off. I mean, once a year, getting an entire crew together for 12 years, and it's seamless the way he edits it. It's not like there's title cards saying, okay, now Mason is 12 years old. He's just setting it, and that's really a directorial triumph. So it's a close race. Iñárritu won the Directors Guild Award, and that's the biggest indicator that he'll win. And it's kind of similar to last year. Alfonso Cuarón won the Best Director for Gravity, but 12 Years a Slave won Best Picture. Therefore, I think Iñárritu wins Best Director. Linklater coming up a bit short. I personally would vote for Linklater, even though I appreciated what a great job Iñárritu did. And he's a great director. He did Babel, he did 21 Grams, Amaros Paros. I mean, he's a wonderful director, so he's getting it for being an innovator as well.
So, but you're saying that you think Iñárritu will win for Birdman, and you think that if you had a vote, you would vote for Linklater for Boyhood.
That is correct.
I loved Birdman as well. He also wrote that, didn't he? He was
co-wrote it, yeah.
Co-wrote it, because I read a bunch about that movie before I saw it, and I loved it, although I did not care for the ending. I don't want to ruin it for people.
So third act issues there with the magic realism.
I mean, it was almost like the 10th act, because it was really only the very end I didn't like.
Right.
But I thought the movie was sensational, so I have no argument with that.
Yeah, trying a little too hard at the end. I hear you.
All right, Best Supporting Actress, who do you believe will win?
Patricia Arquette is going to win for Boyhood. She takes what is really kind of a tired cliche of these single moms who can be whiny and obnoxious, and she really makes it into a really full-blooded character. And you can just feel the passion that she brings to the role, and the fact that I watch that movie, I just appreciate single moms everywhere now, and then the kind of just Herculean effort it takes just to keep your kids on one path, and just, it does so without avoiding cliches, which I think is such an incredible feat in that movie, because you hear so many cliches about adolescence and what boys and girls try to avoid, and the three of us are dads, so we're all going to go through it as well. But I thought that she did just a wonderful job of showing that you can be a hardworking, driven mother, have some mistakes, have some foibles. Her choice of partners are certainly a little poor when it comes to some of the drunks that she ends up running around with when Ethan Hawke and her don't work out. But I thought as a performance, she was excellent. I personally would vote for Keira Knightley. I thought she was sensational in The Imitation Game, which is a movie that's probably going to win one Oscar. It's going to win Adapted Screenplay. It's an incredible story. And Keira Knightley's character is so important because Alan Turing, Benedict Cumberbatch's character, is so chilly, and he's so enigmatic, and he's so aloof. And her character is critical because she's basically the audience. She's the one that has to warm him and to humanize him and to make his character likable and relatable. So I would give it to Keira Knightley, who's been nominated before for Pride and Prejudice, but Patricia Arquette's won every major critics prize, Golden Globe, the SAGs, Toronto Film Critics, New York, Chicago Film Critics. Arquette's going to win.
Oh, yeah, the Toronto, after the Oscars, the one you really want.
Yeah, right.
Mike and Adnan.
No bias.
So you would vote for Keira Knightley, but you think Patricia Arquette is going to win?
That's correct.
All right, Best Supporting Actor.
I'm thrilled that DK is with me on this because I suggested he go see Whiplash and he enjoyed it as much as I did. J.K. Simmons, who is, first of all, the performance is great. He plays this just sadistic sociopath of a jazz music teacher that you've never seen before. He plays him the way like R. Lee Ermey played a drill sergeant in Stanley Kubrick's Full Metal Jacket. Like he seems to be airlifted out of like Vietnam or the Philippines or Iraq, and that's how he has such intensity. And what makes the performance so great is he's not just some lunatic. He actually believes that his way of teaching and of being so focused and so disciplined is going to work. And it's not over the top. I mean, it's very carefully measured the way he builds up his anger, and he's very calculating, and it's very smart the way he does it. In addition to how great the role is, and he's won every major critics prize, is the fact he's a 60-year-old veteran character actor. I loved him on the show Oz. He played Schillinger a decade ago. He's on the Farmers Insurance commercials. He was Peter Parker's boss in Spider-Man. I mean, he's had a widely distinguished, very versatile career, and he's going to win. I'd vote for J.K. Simmons, too. I know, Greeny, you liked Edward Norton and Birdman. Priscilla's a big fan of him, too. I loved Ethan Hawke in Boyhood, and I thought Mark Ruffalo was the best part of Foxcatcher, a movie which was not nominated for Best Picture. Carell's up for Best Actor, kind of a token nomination. When these comedic actors try something serious, he has no chance of winning. And the director's up as well, who I don't think he should have been. Bennett Miller's nominated. He should not have been nominated ahead of Ava DuVernay for Selma. But Ruffalo, actually, I think is the best part of Foxcatcher because Carell's just playing this kind of twisted freak, and he's very kind of, unsympathetic. Tatum is just angry and all rage. Ruffalo's the one who actually has the hardest role, and he's very sympathetic in the movie. But ultimately, to your question, it's going to be J.K. Simmons.
The one thing with J.K. Simmons that I really appreciate is when he had the scene where he's telling the guy to drum the beat, and he's off-tempo, and you can't even tell. Listening to it, he keeps making him stop. You can almost feel the pressure that he's under while he's trying to drum for it. It was insane.
It's a great point, Danny, because it's an intense viewing experience, which you would not expect about a jazz music teacher and his protege.
The Oscars again Sunday night on ABC. Coverage starts 7 o'clock Eastern time. Best Actress.
It's a slam dunk. It's going to be Julianne Moore, and I would vote for her as well. Fifth nomination. She's just divinely talented and beautiful in every aspect you could imagine. Her character, Alice, is someone who was a linguistics professor suffering from early onset Alzheimer's. And she plays the role with such intelligence and such conviction. And a lot of other actresses, I think, kind of dip into too much sentimental territory, those kinds of roles. And the thing is, she doesn't. She just won't allow herself to do that. And she gives it the correct amount of grace and compassion. And it ends up being heartbreaking, but it's not pulling at your heartstrings as it does so. It gets you those beats in a very intelligent and effective manner. And there's some humor in there as well. Alec Baldwin plays her husband. I thought he was kind of an underrated character in the movie. It shows how tough the caregiver role can be in a situation like that. She should have won an Oscar for The End of the Affair. Speaking of great books, Graham Greene, it was adapted into a movie by Neil Jordan in 1999, so she should have won before. Probably should have won for Boogie Nights for supporting actress. So fifth nomination, never won before. She is the ultimate slam dunk this year.
All right, Julianne Moore for Still Alice. Best Actor.
This is the one, boys. This is the one that's going to be a lot of fun because I'm pulling with every part of my being for Michael Keaton for Birdman because there's two categories here, fellas, you always find. There's the actor who gives just an unbelievable dynamo of a performance, like a real tour de force like Daniel Day-Lewis in There Will Be Blood. And then there's the Oscar that goes to the guy who deserves it as a Lifetime Achievement Award, which is Al Pacino in Son of a Woman, and should have won for The Godfather and Serpico and Dog Day Afternoon. Denzel won for Training Day, should have won for Malcolm X. So Keaton is actually that rare actor who could fit into both categories. I think it's the best performance of the year in terms of the best actors that are nominated because David Oyelowo should have been nominated for Selma, probably should win the award for his role as Dr. King, which was so resounding and was an absolute miscarriage of justice. Having said that, of the guys nominated, Keaton's performance, he's ferocious, he's funny, it's vanity-free, he's walking through Times Square in his tighty whities. I mean, it's dramatic, but it's also poignant. There's so many layers to that role. Having said that, I'm terrified the winner is going to be not Benedict Cumberbatch. I love him.
Bradley Cooper.
Eddie Redmayne, unfortunately, is going to win for Theory of Everything. And this is my issue with this movie. It's not that it's a bad movie. It's just not a very good movie. And it's the most predictable biopic you could imagine in years. The fact it's nominated for Best Picture, Best Actor, Best Actress is a joke. it just follows such a formulaic model. British actor, young, good-looking guy, playing a handicapped character, playing a real-life character. Now, Stephen Hawking is a brilliant man, and he deserves to have a great film made about him. The documentary, Brief History of Time, about his book is, in fact, extraordinary. This movie is not that. It is a paint-by-numbers story, and I'm fearful of the fact he's going to win just for those reasons I mentioned, and not for the fact it's actually a great performance. And the problem is, the winner of the SAG Award, the Screen Actors Guild Award, has won 10 straight years. Whoever wins Best Actor wins the Oscar, and Redmayne beat Keaton, even though Keaton won the Golden Globe. So I'm hoping I'm wrong. I'm going to throw myself through the window if Redmayne wins, but I think he's going to win.
All right, and then finally, Best Picture is the last category. What do you think will win?
Boyhood's going to win, although it is tight right now with Birdman, because Birdman won the Producers Guild Award, it's won the Directors Guild Award, but Boyhood won the Golden Globe, and I think it's just such an extraordinary achievement. Not only the technical story, but I just think, and to use a word you'd appreciate, Greeny, as an author, an act of verisimilitude, which I did have to double-check, and it meant right. The appearance of keeping it real. I mean, it feels like a documentary, and yet it's a work of narrative fiction. And the way Richard Linklater, the director, brought this together was to kind of meet with Eller Coltrane and say, all right, what are you going through? Girls, drugs, okay, whatever. He'd write that into a story that let's get Ethan Hawke, Arquette, let's shoot this all together. I mean, it's extraordinary. I think if you're a son, you can appreciate it. If you're a dad, you can appreciate it. It's about mothers and sons. It's about sibling rivalries. It's one of those timeless pictures that I think really will stand the test of time. It's a quiet indie movie. There's been some backlash against it. Some people saying, well, there's not enough going on in it. Like I needed some car chases. There's some gunfights. So Birdman's making a push. And I will say this. If there's one thing Hollywood loves, it's self-referential movies. And Birdman's all about movies and Broadway and the making of movies. So do not be surprised if Birdman has enough of a push, but I think it's Boyhood that wins, and I think Boyhood should win.
Again, it is the Oscars Sunday night on ABC. The coverage starts at 7 o'clock Eastern. Extraordinarily well done, Adnan.
I appreciate that, fella.
I love the vocabulary you go into when you are going into your film criticism role. That's exceptionally well done.
The captain.
The best of Mike and Mike.
Mike and Mike.
Let's go live to the NFL Combine in Indianapolis and bring in our front office insider, Louis Riddick, who does a terrific job for us. And, Louis, you were effusive in your praise of Marcus Mariota, at least through the interview process, from what you heard. Give us a sense of what you're hearing from people about how Mariota has performed so far. Obviously, he hasn't done anything on the field, but the first impression he's given people.
Yeah, and it's just that, Mike. It's the first impression. And look, I don't think anybody's surprised over how composed and how mature Marcus is. I think what it was is there's been some people who have been even more surprised or just pleasantly surprised at how much in command he is as far as where he's coming from and where he still needs to go. His grasp of NFL concepts, his ability to take information, regurgitate it back out to them, pro-style verbiage, and then talk about defensive concepts, where the ball needs to go, what his progressions are like, what kind of footwork he needs to use, and all the different kind of things just fundamentally that all go into playing the quarterback position. People were just blown away at just how dialed in he was about, again, where he is coming from and where he still needs to get to. And people think that the sky is just the absolute limit for him. They just come out of the interview going, I want to work with that kid. I want to work with that kid right there.
Now, Louis, I gave you a little bit of hard time this morning saying there was some hyperbole there because there was a phrase that came out that said one of the best interviews ever. Is that what you were saying, or is it just what you're hearing?
No. That's what I have heard. And I'll tell you what, listen, Danny, I sat in on Russell Wilson's interview. I sat in on Sam Bradford's interview, which were two of the best I had ever seen as far as guys, again, making a great first impression, understanding what it was offensively that they were asked to do in college and what they knew they were going to be asked to do in the pros. And when people started throwing pro-style schematics, pro-style verbiage at them, they were able to talk that language very, very quickly. Those were two of the best that I had seen at the time. The guys who were interviewing him so far yesterday were guys who I know and respect as far as how they teach the quarterback position in particular, and they came out of there saying, Lou, you remember Russell Wilson? This kid is just as good, if not better. I mean, one of the best I have ever seen, and they were just blown away. They think that putting him in the box of a spread-style quarterback, so to speak, which seems to be where people are trying to put him right now until proven otherwise, I think is a big mistake. And I'll just add one more thing. I spent about an hour yesterday talking with Chip Kelly about Marcus and just about football in general. And he talked about, and if you remember back during the national championship game on the pregame show, he talked about just how advanced this kid was at a young age as far as being able to read progressions in the passing game. And he said he thinks it's a big mistake for people to think that this is just a read one, read two, and take off and run. He said he is not that at all. He will surprise people with just how good he will be in a pro-style offense.
What's the buzz been around Jameis Winston's interview process?
You know, again, same thing. You know, Jameis is a different style. Jameis is flamboyant. Jameis is very, very confident, but at the same time, extremely football smart, knew exactly what was being asked of him in Jimbo Fisher's offense, and really they said that he had a grasp of the kind of concepts they were running down there, unlike they had seen before either. He could talk football all day long, and then when they started putting their own verbiage, their own language to use in the interview process, he was able to assimilate that into the things that he had already been taught. And look, no one had any concerns as far as his ability to hit the ground running in a pro-style offense, the same as what you see on the film already. I mean, the projection is not nearly as, let's just say, iffy, so to speak, because you see Jameis doing it in Florida State, but they've come away impressed with him as well.
Mike and Mike Lewis, Riddick is live at Indianapolis at the NFL Scouting Combine for us. And speaking of the two big quarterbacks, there has been a lot made of Jameis Winston and his weight. There was that picture that circulated over the weekend. What are you hearing people say about that? And then on the flip side, Mariota, Danny was describing him this morning as potentially a bit on the slight side. So what are your thoughts on the body frames of those two guys, what you're hearing from the evaluators, and how you think it will affect them going forward?
Sure, it was obvious that you could see from what I've been told that Jameis had cut weight before he got here in order to get his weight down to an area where people thought, you know, at 230-something pounds was acceptable. His body type is, you know, one guy described it to me as being a bit doughy, as being a bit soft, someone who really doesn't get in the weight room, someone who really right now has not put a lot of emphasis on the weight training aspect of it. And it's something, you know, they consider him to be a big bone, thick type of kid who, from a body type perspective, is conducive to maybe potentially having weight problems if you don't pay attention to it and you're not strict with your diet, you're not strict with your training regimen. So those are all things that they're going to ask him about incessantly while he's here. They're going to ask him about what's your training program, what are you doing between now and the draft, and what's going to be your plan as far as keeping your weight under control once you're in the NFL. Marcus, on the other hand, I'll tell you this. People kind of look at him and, again, put him in the box of someone who's tall, slender, maybe he'd have some durability problems. A couple people told me the same thing, and these are guys who I respect highly, guys who I know very well, who said he is a lot thicker and a lot more muscular than you think. When you look at him come up on the stage in shorts, and that's it, the kid is thick. The kid's put together now, so that is a very rock-solid 220-something pounds that kind of caught people off guard.
It seems every year at the Combine there's sort of players who kind of, you know, either come out of nowhere or they definitely create a lot of buzz. Now, obviously, the quarterbacks we've talked about. Any other skill position or position players that are generating some buzz and maybe gaining some momentum headed in the draft because of the Combine?
Yes, for sure. Right now, it's the wide receiver group because of how much size and how much potential speed that you're going to see when these guys start running. It's really, you know, wide receivers and DBs really get people's attention, especially when it's time to, you know, for the marquee event, which is the 40-yard dash. And this year, you're going to see some people, you know, like Philip Dorsett, Devin Smith. People want to see how fast Amari Cooper is, and then people want to see just how fast Kevin White is. I mean, there's some people who are going to blaze some serious times. And then when they get out there and actually start doing the football drills, you're going to see some great athleticism. So for sure, right now, at the wide receiver group, that's where people are looking for people to really light it up.
That's our Lewis Riddick will be there covering, obviously, for us and SportsCenter, everybody else, as we go through the Combine. Thank you, Lewis. We'll check in with you again on Monday.
You bet. Thanks a lot, Mike. See you, Danny.
The best of Mike and Mike.
I want to make a very quick get-well wish before we get back to Chris Bosh. And many of you probably saw it on Twitter yesterday. If you are a viewer of ESPN, a fan of ESPN, then you know Shelley Smith, who is a dear friend to all of us and has been at ESPN longer than I've been here, and I've been here 18 years. And you are aware, but you're probably aware that she is battling cancer. She's begun the chemotherapy treatments, and yesterday she tweeted photos of herself having her head shaved, which cannot be easy for anyone, and is particularly, I'm sure, not easy for a woman who makes a living on television. And I just commend her courage for the way she has handled this from the moment, at least to my knowledge, that she was diagnosed. She has been out front talking about it, raising awareness, talking to people, displaying, again, in my view, extraordinary courage. And so I just want to say, for those of you who've seen the photos on Twitter, I want to say, Shelley, you look beautiful, absolutely beautiful. And we all look forward to seeing you back at work where you belong as soon as possible. So those thoughts from me and from all of us at ESPN.
Couldn't agree more. I mean, when you think of ESPN, she's one of the faces of ESPN. I mean, when I think of, you know, going back and watching this network, I always picture her right there at the thick of things. And she has been an unbelievable source of inspiration. I'm sure she'll continue to do that. So our thoughts and prayers are definitely with Shelley.
Yeah, she's a terrific person and a terrific reporter in that order. Then back to the news that we just are reporting here. Again, this is from the Miami Herald and a story by Joe Goodman. The Miami Heat could announce today whether Chris Bosh will be forced to miss the remainder of this season following tests on his lungs. He was admitted to a Miami area hospital yesterday after meeting with a doctor. The Heat's power forward underwent initial tests that proved inconclusive, according to the Heat. The fear is that Bosh could have blood clots on his lungs. If there is a pulmonary embolus or multiple clots, then Bosh would be out for the remainder of the season and possibly longer while being treated with blood thinners for a pulmonary embolism. And then it just goes into a lengthy description of the Heat and their situation. The game, Bosh has not felt well since earlier in the All-Star break. According to his teammate Dwayne Wade, the two of them traveled together to Haiti on Monday. Bosh and Wade were also together in New York for the All-Star game. Again, you'd probably been hearing stories that he had not been feeling well, that he came back early from his trip to Haiti. Brian Windhorst earlier this morning told us that he had gone to a doctor, and the doctor had recommended that he go to a hospital, which is always obviously a bit of an ominous sign. And now, again, this news that he could announce, I underline the word could announce today, whether Chris Bosh will be forced to miss the remainder of the season. So it is not being reported that he will. It is being speculated that he may. And I will repeat again, as the rest of the country has joined us, Chris has hosted this show with me. He is a good friend to us on this show. He's a regular guest with us. He is a very nice man. He is a smart, thoughtful, interesting guy, well above and beyond his abilities as a basketball player. So my first thought here is exclusively about him being okay. You hear about people with, hear about a guy having blood clots in his lungs, and that's a lot scarier than just whether or not he can play basketball this season. So first and foremost, Danny, our thoughts are with Chris, and I hope that he is well and as well as can be, and we look forward to seeing him soon.
Yeah, I mean, it makes everything seem small. We were talking about, what a big day it was yesterday with the trade deadline, and this kind of keeps things all in perspective, and you just hope it's as minor an issue as it could possibly with Chris Bosh, and whatever he needs to do to get healthy, to get back, to get right, that he does that and gets it quickly.
Yeah, again, admitted yesterday to a hospital after meeting with a doctor. Initial test proved inconclusive. But when you start hearing they may announce today whether he'll be forced to miss, well, let's not speculate. There's nothing here to speculate about. Again, we will just wish him the best and hope that he is well. It does make irrelevant the conversation we've been having all morning long, of course, about just how good this acquisition of Goran Dragic makes the Heat. The speculation that maybe they have the best starting five now in the Eastern Conference. Because if Chris Bosh is not a member of that, then obviously they aren't that. But that's a different discussion for an entirely different day. So we'll leave that at that and move on. It's a very busy sports weekend. NBA gets going back again in full swing tonight. Couple of games yesterday. NFL Combine. What are the things to be watching for with the Combine this weekend, Danny?
40
times. You have a close
40 times I think are going to be fascinating to watch. But
how important are those with the big guys at the top? I mean, Mariota's going to fly, right?
To me, it doesn't even matter with the quarterbacks. You want to see something sub-5, and Mariota's going to blow people away. You just don't. You want to see a good time. But the receivers, you always see kind of, those Chris Johnson type times. See who's going to kind of light up the charts. You never gave us your favorite sports movie, though. What is yours? Do you have a comedy and a drama like the number one?
It's so
picks?
hard to say.
Everybody else did, I think.
I know. If I had to pick my favorite sports comedy, I mean, it's such an unknown movie. But, there are some movies that become, especially if, growing up, become like a part of your family.
Yeah.
Like I love the sports comedy Fast Break, which is not nearly that well known of a movie, but it's Gabe Kaplan and Bernard King from the late 70s. I love that movie. If I have to pick a more well known movie as a comedy, I would have to split my vote between Caddyshack and Slapshot. I'll probably go Caddyshack number one because I'm a golfer and I love golf, so I would go there. And then as far as dramas, and the more recent ones, Hoosiers, Remember the Titans, the classic Raging Bull. But I think if I'm going to pick one, just for the sake of picking one, I'll pick Rocky. The original Rocky is a movie that I love. No matter how many times I've seen it, I enjoy it over and over.
I'm going with comedy for Caddyshack. Do you know why?
Because?
The street that I grew up on They actually used one of the houses on my street for Judge Smail's house.
All right, and your name is Danny. So, Danny, I've sentenced boys younger than you to the electric chair, Danny. Didn't want to do it, felt I owed it to them. But anyway, good to have a little bit of a laugh at the end of the show. Thank you very much for doing this today. It was a terrific day. Obviously, a little bit of a somber note here with great concern around the sports world for Chris Bosh, and stay with ESPN throughout the family of networks as we'll continue to try to get the latest information, and first and foremost hope that Chris Bosh is okay. That's the most important thing, and nothing is even close. Have a wonderful weekend, and we'll see you back and better than ever on Monday morning right here, Mike and Mike on ESPN Radio.
This has been the best of Mike and Mike on ESPN Radio Pod Center. To hear more from Mike and Mike, log on to ESPNradio.com and become an ESPN Radio Insider.
The best of Mike and Mike.